Hello everyone, it is time for our weekly live stream. So we're going to do things differently today because I have zero topic in mind. So I thought we could instead let you guys come up with some topics or some questions, and we'll lead into some answers and some stories probably, because that's usually how it works. Today is Water Test Saturday. Please do test your water. I will be doing that with my aquarium today to make sure everything behind me is doing well. As a quick update, everything's going really well so far. I keep seeing better improvement. I showed a couple of pictures in last night's diary of that coral right there and that little bit of the yellow scroll coral. So it had some polyps hanging in there, but now the meat between the polyps, the skin, the tissue, has turned into a puddle, and the leading edge of the puddle all the way around is yellow. So that will be a macro shot you'll see today, so you can actually see it. And then in a couple of weeks, now that it's kind of firmed up and showing some improvement, I will take it to the saw and I'll trim off all of the dead skeletons so I can just grow a new coral, instead of having a patch of coral in the middle of a stony skeleton that could end up leading into a lot of algae issues on it. I just would rather not look at that. Both of these two pieces right here, they need to both come out. Between the two pieces in that area where it's like, if you think of the inside of a clam, there is some tissue there that's alive, and then there's some tissue in the other piece. So I want to salvage those two and start fresh. So that'll be nice. Okay, so today, because you're making your topics, be sure to put Add Me Loves Reef, so that way I can see it more quickly. For now, I'm just going to try and keep up with the chat as best I can, and we'll have a conversation. I'm actually sitting today. I am really tired. I thought, do I have to do a live stream today? But we do this every Saturday, and I didn't want to leave you in the lurch just because I had an exhaustion point. But it's been a really hard week. So let me say hello to all of you guys. So Thomas, you were first. Good job. Hi, Claudia. And James is here. James, your order is going out next week. Mr. Reef Buster, hello. EJ504, Diatomaceous Reef, what's going on? Bill is here from Saltwater Heaven. Man, that sounds like a great place to be. Hi, Dennis. Oh, man, you posted a picture of your reef tank, and I was just in Club Miller's Reef, and I was like, man, I haven't seen this tank in forever. I mean, literally, I remember the last time I saw pictures was probably Christmas, when you had that super long, I mean, your tank is super long, and you had that crazy wide Christmas tree I've never seen before in my life. So please do post more updates, because that's such a pretty tank, and we all deserve to see it, right? It shouldn't just be for you. Hi, Giovanni. Nicolaj. How do you clean the outside of your tank, he asked. I'm a Windex guy. I've used different products over the years. I used to have something I really liked that worked super well, and it was actually made for reptile habitats. I'm going to say aquarium, because usually the reptile's in an aquarium, even though it's not fish, right? And you'd spray this on, and you would clean the glass with, you know, paper towels, newspaper, an actual physical cloth, maybe a t-shirt, and the glass became silky smooth, and your cleaning magnet would glide across it. It was really, really nice, and I haven't had that stuff in forever. I kind of wish we could get it again. I don't know. I've heard some things about the Fritz glass and acrylic aquarium spray. That might be good enough. I'm not sure. But I would like to get more of that again, because I'm kind of noticing a haze. I've tried a couple of other products that are all natural and good for the environment, and it just seems like I keep spraying it on, I keep wiping it, I have to polish it, and yet it still doesn't look clean. Diatomaceous Reef says, are your daily update vlog styles treating you well? Oh my god, it's so exhausting. I mean, there's always something to do, but it's more work to film it. So that's where the effort, and remember, I told you in the very beginning, I want to keep this easy. I don't want to turn it into a production where I got to bring out the lights and hook up microphones and you know, start editing in Final Cut Pro. I want it to be quick and easy and on my phone. And I've stuck to doing it on my phone, which has worked out well. But there are times where I'm like, oh, I wish I could do this. Oh, I wish I could do that. And I tell myself, don't you dare do that, because once you start turning it into a production, then it gets, it's harder for me to actually do the work. I guess I feel like I don't have the time to invest into doing it that quality every single day. So I'm trying to keep it simple. I do want to mention one thing. So we're talking to the DSLR today. That's where we're going through the Nikon D500. So I got this little guy. So it's a remote that lets me kind of do the focus thing. See? And it can even take a picture of me if I wanted, but it won't. But I kept going behind the camera, and I would then, hit the shutter, but it would focus on the reef, and then I'd be standing in front of the tank and I'd be blurry. So I picked this thing up last weekend. I hooked it up, and it is working as it should. Oh, I'm looking at my shirt. So there was a problem. I mentioned all this on the live stream, how I have all these products, and you can buy a shirt if you wanted. And then I went to the website, and they weren't there on YouTube. And I thought, man, what happened? So I contacted YouTube, and then I contacted Teespring, who actually does the printing. And there was some kind of issue between the two companies with somehow there was a glitch, and the information was not handshaking over like it should. So I got a message yesterday saying it's working. So I went to youtube.com/MilosReef, and you can see all the headers, and there was shop, and I clicked shop, and there's one sweatshirt. So I will work on that to put the other products on there. I have to figure out how to do it. But there was something like 37 items on there. So maybe there's something you guys might like and you can get. And I don't have an update on the topic I had with Rich last week, but I did have someone reach out to me that said, hey, we've actually been working on something along what you're discussing for over a year. You're welcome to join us. So that is the next step. I will probably join them and see what's going on and see what I can do to be a participant, or if what they need next to make things happen, just whatever. I need to find out. I know nothing. So we're going to put our heads together. And of course, as more information comes out, I will let you know as well, because I want you to be involved. But as I said, any of the t-shirts or things you buy off of that shop section of the YouTube channel, I think I'm just going to put that money toward this group if this group is good. Obviously I don't want to waste money, so I want it to go to the right place. But it's a good starting point. I'm fine. If there's some group that's been working on this for a year, maybe they've made some forward momentum already and they've got some things in place. So I'd like to learn more. So that will happen. Nick says, can you carbon dose without a skimmer? Probably. But most people recommend a skimmer. I'm trying to remember. Because when it came to carbon dosing, when I was really reading about it, was probably about 12 years ago. And the protein skimmer removes the dissolved organic compounds, which is the waste. Carbon dosing increases your bacterial population and helps consume more waste in the system, which helps lower the nitrate and phosphate. But because they're consuming, they may be causing more waste. So my memory is bad on this one, but it may be important to have a protein skimmer running. So, okay, I'm going to tell you, just Google it and see what you find out. But I have a feeling you probably do need a protein skimmer to do the carbon dosing. And, you don't have to carbon dose. It's something that a lot of people talk about these days. It seems to be if you have a problem, you should dose carbon. You should dose vinegar, vodka, ethanol, sugar. I mean, there's all these choices out there. But there's other ways of doing it too. So you don't have to necessarily do that. I'm thinking as I'm talking, I'm not dosing any kind of carbon whatsoever right now. I am dosing magnesium. I have a calcium reactor that doses alkalinity and calcium. I dose Prodibio products, which is bacteria, iodine, and strontium. And I'm dosing potassium. But I don't have any kind of sugars going in the system at this point, and I haven't seen a need for it yet. Giovanni says, I have high nitrate and phosphate. What is your take with Nopox from Red Sea? It's kind of a negative reaction. I used it for a while. It didn't work as I expected. And I had someone, write a huge amount of comments on my YouTube channel how I misinterpreted the information. But I can tell you this. When I was dosing it, I did not dose more than the recommended amount. I literally dosed less, probably 10 to 15% less than what I should have every single day. And I had this horrible pink slime everywhere. And when I was going through my phone recently, because I constantly run out of space, I keep trying to find what I can delete. I found all these pictures of how disgusting it was in my sump, how that slime was in the body of the skimmer. It was all spiderweb throughout my sump. It was inside the vortex. It was inside the basket, the strainer that goes into my Abyss pump. It was everywhere. And I remember I would take things out and I would shake them off in a bucket of water and put them back in just to kind of remove some. And I remember taking a fish net and going back and forth to my sump to scoop it up. And people would say, well, that proves you were using too much. But mathematically, I was not. My whole system required something like 54 milliliters a day. And I'm almost certain I was dosing 40 to 45 milliliters a day. So it wasn't even what they recommended. And then all it did was take my phosphates out. It didn't touch the nitrate. And everything I'd read from everywhere I'd looked said that the nitrate comes out first and then the phosphate. And that one person who may be watching right now said, that's not true at all. Where did you hear that? And they said, it's fine. It doesn't matter what order comes out. I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't matter. I still had the slime everywhere. That was a nightmare. And so I didn't like it. Now, my tank sitter, he swore by the stuff, and he had a tank with with 80 nitrate. He used Nopox, had no surprises at all. The nitrate just came down, and I thought, this is so unfair. But I do know that he used it for many years, and I remember at one point when I was doing mine, he was also buying some around the same time, and he said he was starting to get that slime, and he'd never seen that before. So maybe it was something to do with the current recipe that's in the bottle. Maybe something had changed slightly. I don't know. But it didn't take my nitrates down, and that is the bottom line answer to your question. So I'm not a big fan of that one, even though I was really hoping it would work. And I mean, I used 5 different bottles over an 8 or 9 month period trying to reduce it, and I just had no luck. So I can tell you that when I did my deep cleaning on the tank, and did some big water changes, I definitely brought them down. So that is your alternative if you're wanting to get these numbers under control. Now, I didn't touch on phosphate at all, other than Nopox is supposed to touch it. But I use Phosphate Rx. That's my product for removing phosphate from the water, and I've been using it for over a decade. I put it in the tank every once in a while when I get the urge, and it brings them right down overnight, and the next day, they test lower. And then I just kind of let it ride, and it could be 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and then I just dose some more Phosphate Rx, and that's it. That's my phosphate regime. That's what it's always been. Mervyn says, I recently sent an email inquiring about a skimmer stand. Did you receive it? Well, I haven't read yesterday's emails yet, so if you just literally recently did it, then no. But other than that, I should have replied. I do want to mention that it's really best if you guys will email me at sales@milosreef.com. Do I have that here where I can stick it on the screen? That would be super convenient. I don't see it. There it is. So if you can email that email address, that would be ideal for reaching out to me, because I'm getting messages everywhere on the web, and I stumble on them, and then I can't find them later, or I'm in this area but I'm not there, and it would be really best if everything kind of went to sales@milosreef.com. It'd be a lot easier for me to hopefully keep up and answer those questions that come in. I'm gonna leave that on the screen for a little bit. William is here from Michigan. PJ Goblin is from the UK. Adam Moore says, use a power vacuum squeegee for the outside glass. I want pictures. Show me that. Bandit Hill says, I can't get consistent skimming. Any opinion on undersized or oversized skimmers? Sure. The biggest issue when it comes to protein skimmers not cooperating is the body of water the protein skimmer is sitting in. That's the first thing. So if your skimmer is designed to sit in 8 inches of water, and then you let evaporation happen, it goes down to 7, or you top off with a bunch of water because you just feel like I just need to do this, and you bring it up to 10, the protein skimmer is going to underreact and overreact every single time the water level changes. So what I've always done, and what I've recommended to others, is to put a skimmer stand under your protein skimmer to the correct depth if needed. If you don't need a stand, don't do it. But if your skimmer is standing in too much water, you put a stand to lift it up to the proper height. So let's just take the 10-inch depth. Let's say your sump has 10 inches of water in the skimmer zone, and you look up your protein skimmer and they recommend it sits in 6 inches of water. You need a 4-inch stand underneath. You put the skimmer above it, you adjust the knob, and you should be in business. Now, the other thing that makes a protein skimmer go crazy is the different additives we put in the tank. It could be different chemicals. If you're treating for cyanobacteria, for example, that will make them overflow. If you put in PE mysis, the oils in the food, and the different foods you use can totally affect your protein skimmer. The oils in the food can make the bubbles collapse. You actually see the foam lower in the body and it's just kind of boiling, but it's not getting back up into the cup. But in a couple of hours, that should alleviate itself and it should start skimming like it should. Another thing that affects your protein skimmer is literally the weather outside your home. So if you have storms rolling through, the barometric pressure is changing, your protein skimmer could be overflowing or it could be underperforming again. Now, that's just the typical things that happen with a protein skimmer. The other thing that could happen is the venturi tube that goes to the pump, where the water is being chopped up and air is being injected. That little nozzle could be clogged up with salt creep, and you want to make sure that there's no salt in there. And usually, there's a couple things you can do. The first one that's easy to do is get yourself a nice coffee mug of some kind, put in some RODI water, put it in the microwave for like 3 minutes or so that water is like nearly boiling hot. And then take the venturi tube off your protein skimmer and put it in the coffee mug and let it slurp the hot water into the body of the skimmer. That little bit of water will not hurt anything in your tank, but it will melt away salt that's building up within the venturi nozzle to the nipple where the tubing connects. That's usually where this thing solidifies. So if you do that every single week, just a weekly maintenance thing, they will be nice and clear. But if you haven't done this in forever, or if you've never done it before, you may have mixed results. So you may need to actually remove the piece off the protein skimmer where that tubing connects and actually literally look in there. Take a flashlight from the side and a flashlight from above and look inside to make sure there's nothing in there. And it may just look gray. It may look white. That could literally be a clunk of, or a chunk of salt, and you want to chip that out. Now you can try two things. You can try things like toothpicks and dental tools. One of my favorite things to use to clean out salt out of the nozzle is a drill bit that's the same diameter as the hole. And I will just take the bit and put it in there, and I will just twist and basically grind out the salt. Remove the bit, check, blow in it, try again, and just keep doing that until it's completely clear. And then at that point, you can put the tubing back on, try the skimmer, and see if it runs properly. And if it does, then all you have to do at that point is, like I said, go back to a routine of every 1 or 2 weeks with a mug of hot water and let it suck water through to keep it clear and running. Now, another thing that could be happening with your protein skimmer could be that the pump is failing, that the pump is surging. So if you could plug the protein skimmer into a device called a kilowatt, which is this weird looking device that plugs on the wall and has a display on it, you can then plug the protein skimmer into that and you can switch it to watts and you can look at the numbers. And if the numbers are always the same, if they're always 54 watts or something like that, you know it's doing well. If it says 31, 68, 37, 71, 39, 50, and it's just varying, your pump may need to be replaced on the protein skimmer. So those are some thoughts. Now, is it possible to have way too big a skimmer? Yes, it is. Is it possible to have one that's much too small? Yeah, that could be. Like, let's say you had a smaller tank and you got a bigger one. You said, well, I already own the skimmer, I'm going to use it. I'm sure it won't keep up, but that's okay. And it won't keep up. You have to have one that pretty much matches your system. But if you go supersized, what usually happens is there's not enough proteins in the water for the skimmer to actually export anything. So you do want something that's pretty close to what your tank needs. Now, the protein skimmer I'm using is the Nios 300. I've been using it for probably almost 5 years. And when they promoted it at MACNA, they said it was rated for up to 1,000 gallons. And I just thought, I don't believe that. I really didn't. And I looked at it, and it's not even as big as the skimmer I had before. But I knew it was going to be more efficient, and it was definitely prettier. And after 14 years of using my Reef skimmer, I said, I'm willing to try a different skimmer. I'd like to try that one, but I don't believe it does 1,000 gallons. Now, I've never seen one on a 1,000-gallon system, so I don't know if it actually does. But it seems to keep up well with my 450 gallons behind me. So let's just say I think it's good for a 500-gallon system that's got a mixed reef and a decent fish load. Now, I've had those little sneaky doubts that happen in the back of your head where you're thinking, is that really a problem or not? And where I'm going with this is when I had the high nitrate and I was trying to resolve it with different products like No-Pox or the BioBricks or I did vodka dosing briefly because I was getting frustrated. Those different things I did. Oh, dang it, I forgot to mention something. Oh, I'll do it in a second. But I did notice my skimmer wasn't pulling out nearly as much as it should, and I thought, well, maybe that's why I have nitrates, because my skimmer's underperforming. And then I started thinking, well, is it really rated for even my size tank? And so I started having those doubts. But since doing the big reset on my tank, I did start cleaning the heck out of the sand bed. I removed a lot of dead skeleton. I cleaned it up to where there's a lot more flow. I mean, I really focused on cleaning. And nitrates have come down, 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 down. And, you know, the last few weeks I've checked, they just stay at 10. The protein skimmer, if it was really underperforming or not doing the job, my nitrates would be creeping back up because the skimmer can't do it. But since that's not the case, I believe that my skimmer is actually perfectly fine. And I do strongly believe it's good for a 500-gallon system. I still don't know if it's good enough for 1,000. I'd have to see that for my own eyes. But that's okay. How many of us actually own 1,000-gallon reefs? I mean, what's to debate? Now, the one thing I forgot to mention before about no-pox dosing is that if you're going to dose that in your system, you need to make sure that your protein skimmer is skimming really wet. That means the collection cup is filling up with fluid every single day. And that is the one thing I did not do when I had all that pink slime happening. I didn't even touch my skimmer. I just let my skimmer do its job. And that was the one thing when I did my emails back and forth with Red Sea, trying to figure out what I was doing wrong or why it wasn't working like I expected and what was happening. The one thing they pointed out, I was like, well, that's good to know. They said you should be skimming more wet. So in my situation, I probably should have been skimming out half a gallon to maybe even a gallon of fluid a day, which means I'd have to have the foam really high up in the collection cup to where it's almost ready to boil over. And that way it would just pull out whatever no-pox does. And maybe I would have had less slime in my sump. I don't know. I was just so sick of cleaning it up. I was like, I'm done. I'm never using this stuff again. All right. Sorry, Red Sea. It just was not for me. Oh, man. EJ, you're in Louisiana, right? He said, I'm glad to hear your reef is improving. I lost all my coral, but my fish survived. The temperature was 84 to 85 degrees for about 9 days. Yeah, you're in Louisiana. After Ida passed. Time for a reset, I guess. Your info is a huge help during this time. You know, that's one of the videos that will be coming out. I will actually, I didn't feel comfortable releasing the reef reset video, which was when I did all that work with Dwayne, because my tank was looking so bad. I just didn't need more people saying, well, this just proves why your tank did so bad, because it didn't. But it just seemed like it was a weird overlap, and so I've been sitting on that footage, but I will release that. Also, for those of you that have joined the YouTube Milo's Reef channel, you literally paid the join button, where you pay a monthly subscription of like $5 or $10 a month. I put a comment out to all of those members that I would be releasing a video about another project going on. That video will happen today. So if you haven't joined this channel yet and you'd like to, you can, and then you'll get to see it as well. So that is coming up. There will probably be a couple more of those behind the scene videos that will be released through the join section. And I believe it's just youtube.com/milosreef/join. So it's easy to get to. If you're on iOS or on the iPad, you know, an iPhone or an iPad, you can't see the join button. But if you're on Android, you can. So that's why I had to tell you it's youtube.com/milosreef/join. So you can actually just get to it in a browser and click the button. Also, the members will be getting a live stream just for them next week, probably in the middle of the week. So that I will let you guys know. So again, if you're a member, you get that perk. So let's go to the next question. Gus started a question, didn't finish it. Gus, tell me your whole question. They wrote, have you heard about needing to have? ... To be continued, y'all. To be continued. Mr. Reefbuster says, what are your thoughts on an ATO system versus a gravity-fed ATO setup? So for those of you who don't know what ATO stands for, it's automatic top-off. And he was asking, what are my thoughts on automated versus gravity-fed? Gravity-fed will last you forever. And I've seen a few setups where people did that. And basically they had a bin, like a Sterlite or a Rubbermaid container that was up on a table near the reef tank, and they'd fill that up with RODI water. They just pour it in and fill it up, and it'll be full of that water, and then low in the container with some tubing, that then went to a float valve down in the sump. And as they pour in the water there, the float valve in the sump would drop and allow water to trickle in, and then it would rise up and it would stop the flow of water because it's just the pressure of gravity that's feeding the water. And it's pretty safe. And the float valve will probably last you a decade without any issues whatsoever. So it is a very simple fail-safe. Your only job is to refill the container up on top of the table or inside the cabinet or wherever it is. But it has to be higher than the sump to literally use gravity to drain down. I remember I went to somebody's house and he showed it to me. I was like, man, that's so simple and so awesome. I love it. But, you know, me, I couldn't do that. I had a much bigger tank. He had a nice small little reef, like a 40-gallon breeder or something. And I had a 280-gallon reef. And I was like, well, I do want some kind of automation, but I don't know what I'm going to use. And I remember I wired up something myself. I think I used float switches instead of float valves. And I think it was somehow connected to my Apex through the breakout box. I'm not 100% certain because that was a long time ago. This is the time period of 2004 to 2010. But I do remember the float switch hung in the sump. And then when the switch dropped because of evaporation, you know, there's less water, it would then turn on an aqua lifter. And the aqua lifter would draw water up through... Uh-oh. I'll mute myself for 1 second. Okay, I closed the door just in case because she's going to keep barking at whatever's happening in front. So the aqua lifter has two nipples on it for tubing. One is in and one is out, and it's actually marked on the front of the pump. If you look really closely in the red area, you'll see the arrows showing which way water flows. And it had a maximum of, I think it could pull and push like 30 inches. So if you had a container of water with a solid top, you could put the aqua lifter on top of that, and it would draw water up, you know, the 14, 15, 16 inches, and then it would go out 16 inches into your sump. And it worked really well. It cost like $11 for that pump. It moved 3 gallons an hour, so super slow, and used 3 watts of power. So it was no electricity at all, and it was dead silent. It just looked like an air pump. And all it did was move the water from the container into the sump based on the float switch, activating that pump, turning it on and off. So I must have somehow tied it in, like I said, with the breakout box, possibly an X10 module. I don't even remember. It was so long ago. But later on, when I set up the 400-gallon, I still used the Aqualifter system as my pump. Rather than putting a pump inside the water that I'm going to use for top off, I didn't want to pollute the water. I wanted the water to be pristine. Just RODI, nothing in it, and just the piece of tubing that was down there to slurp it up, right? And I used the Aqualifter for a long time, and it worked out really, really well. And then I ended up switching to a do-it-yourself kit that was called Top It Off. The Top It Off Deluxe kit. And it came with all these components, with a solenoid, with a relay. It came with float switches and float switch guards. And it had this space-age plastic that you could put in boiling water, and you could then bend it to fit over your tank and cut it with scissors. It was really neat. I hear Jack barking. I hope it's not too picking it up too much on the microphone. Let me turn this other thing off. You're tired of looking at it. If I can find it, there it is. All right. So the deluxe Top It Off kit was this whole thing to do top off, but I still used the Aqualifter for a long time. And then eventually I changed it to, I think it's called Auto Aqua. And they had their nice little top off kit that held on magnetically to the sump. And I could actually move it an inch down or an inch up or even higher because it held on with magnets. And it was great. And I loved that. I used it for a long time. And then I tried something else. I used the Ice Cap top off kit. And then after that, I tried a different one. And now I've been using the ATK, which is part of the Apex ecosystem for probably the last 3 or 4 years. And that's what you saw in one of the Reef diaries. I was cleaning off the optical sensors on that section that had the float valve. And that's worked out really, really well. So which do I prefer? I like automation. I like gizmos. The Auto Aqua Micro ATO is great. It's affordable, like 135 bucks. Works on small systems, works on systems that have a solid background, like the back of an all-in-one tank. You could literally put that little optical sensor inside the back of the tank where it's all black and you can't see anything. Doesn't have to look through the walls of anything, right? And on the outside of the back of the tank, you put a magnet to hold it in place. You put your jug of water on the floor with their tiny little pump that you put in the jug. It could push up like 6 feet high, and then the tubing that went into the back of the all-in-one tank had a magnetic holder as well. So you put the holder inside, put the tubing in it, put the magnet on the back. Everything stayed in place, turns on and off, and if for some reason there's an issue, it just stops topping off and just beeps until you unplug it and plug it in. So literally, it won't just beep for a minute and you didn't hear the warning. It will beep until you walk into the room. So if you're at work all day and you come home and your system is beeping, you could then investigate what's going on. So I like that one a lot. And it's just the benefit of the automated ones is usually they take up less space versus gravity fed. Super long answer to your question. Bill says, what's the best way to get scratches out of the inside of an acrylic tank? Well, it needs to be polished and it's no fun, and most people will drain the tank down completely, take it outside, and start the arduous process of sanding it and buffing it layer by layer by layer until they get it completely pristine and new again. In my frag tank, the inside of it's ruined. It's not ruined with scratches, it was more like some kind of a calcification thing that happened because that tank had a calcium level of over 500 for a super long time, which I guess was from the rock that I used. It was a brand of rock I'd never used before. I said, yeah, sure, I'll put it in the frag tank. And I had nothing but problems with that tank. And then, you know, I neglected the tank, ignored it, and when I tried to clean it, I couldn't clean it enough. It was like an orange peel texture on the inside. It's very weird. And so I almost never show pictures of it because there's nothing to see. You can't see through it. And I kept saying, well, if I take the tank down and I do this whole polishing thing, I can have a video for YouTube showing the process. But what I really want to do is just build a new tank and put it in place and move on with my life. But then if I do that, I will have to take down the old tank, which then I could, in theory, put outside and I could do the process of polishing it out and make a video for YouTube. So you might get a video from me one day. Now, one guy who went by the name Reef Keeper 2 on the forums back in the day had this beautiful all acrylic tank, probably 550 gallons, maybe bigger. He lives in Boston, got Tank of the Month twice because the system is amazing. And he would every single winter polish out the scratches in the existing tank while it was running. And basically he used the cleaning magnets with different grades of sandpaper, and he used a very specific type of filter down in his basement that would remove that little bit of dust that happened as he was working the acrylic. And his acrylic looked perfect. 6-7 years later, it was pristine and gorgeous. And you're like, God. And every single winter, that was his thing. He would spend, I don't even know what he did. I don't know if it took him weeks or months, but that was his hobby. And he would have this beautiful, perfect acrylic. And I remember when I was visiting him, I was looking at the lights on top, and they were just sitting up there, and they were just like, and they had some kind of a frame, and he had to like move them out of the way to work in the tank. And so I'm looking at the lights, and I noticed the whole top of his tank is just scratched to death. He goes, don't look at the top, I never polished that part. And I was like, it's okay, I mean, I don't care. But it was night and day. I mean, the top was just destroyed, and all the walls were like brand new acrylic. He did a great job, but he was very reliant upon and urged everyone to use this diatomaceous filter. Not diatomaceous earth, the powder, but he had this crazy ancient thing from like 1970. It was like this big glass jar that had a motor on top, and inside it was this pleated material that if you were to expand it, it was crazy long, like, I don't know, 6 feet, 18 feet. And, you know, it all came together like an accordion and was pushed down in that jar, and that motor on the top. I mean, it looked like something you'd use to, I don't know, make alcohol. But somehow this thing would, because of all those pleats, it could trap the dust and not clog up. And he could just do his thing where he's, like I said, he's sanding it. And he would sand side to side with one grit. And when he completed that entire panel, I guess he waited for the water to clear. Maybe the next day he would go the next grit down, and then we'd sand this way with the cleaning magnet, up and down, up and down, up and down, until the whole panel's done. And then the water has to clarify, and then the next day, the next grit, and go side to side. And you always do that. You never just keep sanding the same direction. You go this way, and then you go this way. And it's a whole ordeal. It's a lot of work. And he did it with a reef inside, which was amazing. That's why I was so impressed. Because it's one thing to do this whole process out on a workbench or on sawhorses, and you've got a buffing grinder wheel, and you're doing your thing. That's one thing. But what he was doing was cleaning it right around the fish and the corals and the anemone. It was really neat. PJ is telling us that he's just spending money left and right on his reef tank. Apparently needs a new tank, needs to deal with the dosers, got to get new lights. Yeah, you're going to be spending some money. By the way, behind me, right, where am I pointing? It's right there. That coral, that is the worst offender of everything in the tank right now. Of everything that happened in the tank, I guess a month ago, that is the one that is still very, very white. But the perimeter all around the bottom and all across the back is either dark green or light green, and the little mouths are still pink. So there's a little, I know you can't see anything on the webcam, but this one here is vastly better. A lot of the green is returned. The very middle of it is still kind of pale, well, kind of very pale, but it's working its way up every single day. And I think that's going to fill in the next 3 weeks or so. This one might take 2 months to recover. We'll have to see. But it's just this big white thing. I hate looking at it. It's like right in front. But that is what it is. Claudia says, do you have a video on how to set up the Skimmer Wi-Fi pump? I finally bought one for my calcium reactor. It's been sitting next to my 190 for 2 weeks. You bought the Skimmer X1 Pro T for your calcium reactor? Or just the regular X1 Wi-Fi? Because the Pro T, it's kind of complicated. I remember spending about 20 minutes trying to get it to communicate with my Wi-Fi and get everything running. And I kept looking at the manual. I do know there's 2 different QR codes you have to use, one on the package and one on the back of the pump itself. I didn't video it because I was trying to figure it out. And I sold that pump already. I gave it to somebody. So I don't have it to play with anymore to try it again to like make a video, and I don't really want to open a brand new one just to make a video about it because then it's open box. So I don't. There may be one already on YouTube by somebody else. Possibly Skimmer has put out one about it. Parker's Reef is the first person that did a video about it in a lot of detail, and he might have something in there about the setup process. I remember really enjoying watching his video. It's why I even got the pump in the first place, because I was very impressed, and I heard you couldn't get them in the US. So now they're available. I still have a couple in stock, and I know other websites are selling them as well. So it shouldn't be too hard. Like I said, I made it happen after about a 20-minute duration. And I did it right here at this table. I didn't crawl under the tank to do it. I wanted to stand somewhere comfortably. I had a vase full of water, and I had the tubing going into it, and I had the pump right there and the plug nearby, and I just did all my stuff to kind of figure it all out. And I let it run for a few days and kind of messed with the dosing rates and to hear what it sounds like and to observe what it looks like. And it ran really well. So it didn't, I put my hand on it, it wasn't warm to the touch. So I think you should need to spend some time. And the manual was not great, but it was enough hints that I was able to make it work, and hopefully you can do the same. Gus says, have you heard about magnesium and calcium needing to be at a level relative for alkalinity for ionic balance? I thought you could just have them within certain limits and it didn't matter. Well, it does matter. So, yes, Randy Holmes Farley did a very in-depth article about reef parameters probably 15, 18 years ago. And it's super long, very detailed. I mean, if you want to really learn about water, that's the article to read. But what I gained from it mostly was he had a graph, one picture, and he had these diagonal lines, and he had a square box, And what his emphasis was, if all of your stuff is within the square, you're good to go. And I thought, okay, that's what I need to know. His articles are really, they're over my head. Honestly, they are. I've read them. I've tried to read them. But my favorite part of all his articles was scrolling to the bottom where it said, in conclusion, and he explained it for somebody like me. And I could read it and say, okay, got it. And I didn't need to know all the science. I didn't. I still don't. I kind of do, but not that much. I'm not a scientist. I am not a lab rat. That's just not my thing. It's not my passion. But sometimes I have to understand something and I need to learn a little bit more. But, you know, there's a certain target area, and to get that ionic balance wasn't so hard back in the day. You used either the do-it-yourself 2-part, which he gave us the recipe how to make it. It was literally him. He was the one that wrote the article of how to do soda ash and how to use calcium chloride and how to use magnesium sulfate and magnesium chloride to mix up your 3 different solutions. And back then, you would put in equal amounts of alkalinity and calcium every single day, and you dose magnesium as needed. And that was that. ESV was what I used before that even happened. Before that article even came out, ESV had a product called Bionic. And not only was it your additives, but it had like 80 other trace elements in it too. So I literally just dosed part A and part B, or 1 and 2, whatever ESV called theirs, every single day from a little tiny dosing cup. I just put in my 15 milliliters in the cup, and I trickled in an area of high flow for about 10 or 15 seconds until the little cup was empty. And my tank looked great. And I didn't have to ever dose anything. There was no ICP testing back then to verify numbers. It was just a very simple thing to do. And when I ended up with a 55-gallon aquarium, I think I was putting in 35 milliliters of each part of ESV every single day. And the only downside was if I ever traveled, I had to ask someone to do it and hope they did it. I couldn't trust them, you know, especially like, you know, when it's your family member, your kid. You say, hey, I need you to do this each day. And you just picture they just put in the cup and went like that. Or worse, they knew you're coming back home today and they put in like 4 cups worth that day, you know, because you need to, you'd notice not enough was used up, for example. I always had my doubts. So nowadays we have dosing pumps. We can literally program it. We can verify our phone if the dose happened that day with logs. I mean, it's fantastic. But that kind of dosing was simple, and usually you did do equal amounts of A and B each day. But what has happened as we've progressed in this hobby with more and more gear is we have learned that, hey, my alkalinity is too high. I need to dose less of that now, but I need to keep doing this calcium level at this number or even increase it. And so we're not doing the equal balances of like 15 and 15. It might be 5 milliliters of this and 45 milliliters of that, but that shouldn't be your every single day dose for the rest of your life. That should be until the numbers get corrected, and then maybe you're back to this is 10 milliliters and this one's 11 or 12. It shouldn't be an imbalance. And that way, if you got all the numbers in your system and your magnesium is at the proper level and your salinity is at the proper level, then all those other numbers kind of just work out and you get that ionic balance you mentioned. And that's something you actually do want to strive for. Kevin says, what could be the possible reason for constant alkalinity drops? I raise it and then back down it goes. Dosing bionic, part 1 is alkalinity only. Calcium does not seem to fluctuate. Yeah, calcium usually does not fluctuate. Alkalinity is the one thing that changes on a regular basis. It's almost moving around like pH does, but not quite. pH does the up and down every single day. Our alkalinity kind of does that because what we've learned in the last couple of years since the alkalinity tester was first invented, and I'm not talking about the HANA checker, I'm talking about the gizmo that ended up becoming the Trident, which is that water tester that the Apex communicates with. Jim Welsh came up with this machine that could draw water out of your tank into a little thing and send it into a vial to do the test, and then slurp it back out and throw it away, and then send new tank water to rinse it, and then slurp that out and throw it away. And it was just alkalinity, and it did the whole thing. It was really neat. And I did a YouTube video with an interview with him, and he was at MACNA showing it to different companies saying, hey, I think I've come up with a really great machine. Who wants to buy it? and Neptune Systems ended up buying it. So the alkalinity tester became alkaline calcium magnesium in the Trident ecosystem that Neptune Systems uses. So the thing is that alkalinity, from Jim's efforts and his testing with his own tank as he was making the gizmo, he says, you know what? Alkalinity doesn't seem to get used at night at all. It's only being used during the daytime. And he said, so I feel like if I could dose during this hour and this hour and this hour, I can keep my alkalinity more stable, or I can replenish what's being used up, because now I know, okay, that's what it was. It's measuring, and so he's dosing what was being consumed, and so it couldn't dip. Which kind of is, I mean, when you think about it, it's kind of basic. How do we not know this sooner? But he was showing through science that the alkaline was being absorbed and utilized by the corals during the daylight hours, pretty much probably in relation to photosynthesis, right? And so when that happened, you could then really dial in your daily alkalinity dosing. Now, if you don't have such a machine, and you're not measuring alkalinity 14 times a day, like most people don't, then you are going to do more like you're checking each evening at this exact same time. So for example, if you tested your alkalinity every single day at 5 o'clock, you came home from work and you walk in the door and you check alkalinity, you could then make sure your number's about stable, where it should be all the time. But if your number keeps going up, you're dosing too much. If the number goes down, you're not dosing enough. And you're going to have to find out exactly how much it takes, and it's going to take a few days to do it. Now, one approach that can work as a good starting point is you measure the alkalinity today, and you write it down. And then you measure it again tomorrow, the next day, and the next day. And you do not dose any alkalinity while you're doing those tests. So in other words, if we start today and you're manually dosing alkalinity, measure your alkalinity, don't dose, and don't dose for 3 days. And then see where your numbers are after 3 days, and you can then actually see the difference. Like it was here and now it's here, and you can say based on this graph that it has dropped from 8 DKH to 6.8, and you take the difference between those two numbers divided by 3, and that is your average amount of alkalinity needs to be replaced a day. Then there are Reef chemistry calculators that can help you determine how much you need to add each day to maintain it. Or you could do the other choice of, I was at 8, I'm at 6.8 now, the difference is 2.2, right? And then you could say to the Reef chemistry calculator, how do I bring it back up to 8? And it'll say you need this much. And you're like, okay, I need, let's just say the number's 15 milliliters. And then you could say, but I realize it went from 8 to 6.8 in 3 days, and it's saying I need 50 milliliters to bring it back up to 8. So that means I need 5 milliliters a day on average to maintain it. So you would have to bring it up to 8 first, and then, so you'd actually put in 50 milliliters, bring it up to 8. And then after that, you're probably going to do 5 milliliters a day, and it'll stay 8, 8, 8 for the most part. It may go 8.1, 7.9, that kind of thing. But that's kind of what you do. Now, before someone rips my head off saying, why would you tell someone to go from 6.8 to 8? That's too fast. Some things we can do a little bit more rapidly, but if you're nervous, if it makes you uncomfortable, if you're worried, you don't have to put in all 50 milliliters at once. You can put in 5 and wait an hour or 20 minutes and measure again and see where it's at. You could wait till that evening and put in another 5. And the next morning, put in the other 5. And there's your 15, and hopefully you're up at 8 where it needs to be. Alkalinity is one of those numbers. It's actually pretty important. And while it's nice to take your time with certain things, some numbers I don't take my time with. And alkalinity, I want it back where it belongs, within reason. And let me go into that. I want to talk about that for a minute. I'm just going to keep going to alkalinity. I'll come back to your questions. If your alkalinity gets out of your control and gets crazy high because you weren't testing and you weren't paying attention and everything was fine and your reef looks fine, and so you're like, I haven't tested in weeks, I haven't tested in months, and you almost brag about it. So you finally pull out a test kit and you measure, and your alkalinity in your tank is 22 DKH. That's really high. The range is 8 to 11. Somewhere in there is where you want to be, and your reef tank's at 22. I would not recommend you bring it from 22 back down to 10 that day. That's insane, and you would definitely do some damage to your tank, okay? So, and the reason I'm telling you the story is it's happened to me. There was a period a few years ago where I wasn't checking regularly, and I even told you early on when I started recommending Water Test Saturday, I'm not only telling you to do this, I'm telling myself to do it. I was trying to get myself back into better habits, better husbandry. And it was really important that we actually do measure our water. And it's so easy to say, I'll do it later, I'll do it tomorrow, and you'd be shocked at how quickly the days go by and you're like, wow, I didn't do it in 3 weeks. And so then you check and you're like, oh my God, this number. Well, the first thing you do is test it one more time, just to make sure that number's repeatable. And if it comes back high twice, which it did in my case, I'm like, okay. Then I stood back and I looked at the tank and I thought, why aren't you dead? I'm just like, how are you guys open? I'm looking at the LPS corals and they're just doing their thing and they seem fine. I'm thinking, shouldn't you be like little fists of fury, just mad as can be? And they didn't seem to care. So what I did in that scenario, and what had happened, the reason it went so high is something in my calcium reactor had gone wrong. Trying to think what, oh, no, I can't remember. Anyway, something went wrong in the calcium reactor, which I had to correct, which would then put in the proper amount every single day. But, God, it's irritating me now that I can't think of what it was, because I remember it happened, and then a year later it happened again. I was like, are you kidding me? Here we go again? But anyway, so there's a couple times where my reef had actually been crazy high, like 21.5, 22 DKH. And all I did was I brought it down to 16, and I left it at 16 for 3 weeks. And then I brought it down to 12 for 3 weeks, and then I finally brought it down to like 9, 9.5, and I was good to go. And my reef never skipped a beat, didn't even care. It had there was no change. I didn't see corals do better, I didn't see them do worse, I didn't see things die, I didn't see things grow. It just lived. It continued to exist, and my big hiccup of too much alkalinity was corrected. But if you're testing every single week, you should be able to avoid this, barring some kind of equipment failure that overdosed your system with a ton of solution, which sometimes happens to some people, unfortunately. If my tank, which you guys just saw me go through a thing, right? And the whole tank was just really unhappy, and a lot of the corals lost their color, and a lot of the Montes just died. And yet I had a bunch of other corals which are still here. I mean, you didn't see me buy a whole bunch of new corals yet, right? I'm still living with my chalices and my hammers. I had one person give me the Frammer, which is in the back, and it's really pretty. I really enjoy that. And I didn't even pick up replacement SPS like I was planning to do yet. Probably in about 2 weeks that'll start happening. I'll start putting corals in the tank. Dwayne's already cut out some stuff from his reef and they're healing, getting ready to come here. And I will be getting some corals from Frank. Chem wants to get me some corals, so I'll be getting some corals from somewhere with that. I don't know. There's some options, right? I had someone that I recently have been speaking with ever since MACNA, and he said for me to go to his website and look for something I want. So, I mean, there's opportunities there for me to start replenishing and filling the tank up with some pretty things to photograph, because I keep photographing the same things. Now, granted, they're looking better and better, so the pictures are good, but I'd like to see some newer subjects to photograph. But the point is, while that happened, you didn't really see me overreact with anything when it came to how to solve it. I was doing my homework, I did all the ICP tests, I tried to verify the numbers from the first test because I was so surprised by the numbers. And I wanted to go ahead and make sure that if I was going to dose replacement elements that are missing, that they were in fact missing. And when the further ICP testing came back and showed these things were literally lacking in every single system, I was like, okay, it's definitely the salt brand. When I replaced it with a new batch of salt, problem is already alleviated right there, because if I do a water change, it's correcting it, right? The other thing I did was I started dosing a lot of potassium in the system, and I can literally see the tank improving just from the addition of potassium. So since everything went wrong in the tank, which I believe was Reef Diary 17, that was when I did my 200-gallon water change. The only thing I've done since then was dose potassium and 100-gallon water change, and the tank's completely turned around again. But if for some reason my tank was at 22 DKH, I would then bring it down gradually. If I had 5 gallons of kalkwasser going to my tank and turn it into a milky soup, I would be ripping corals out as fast as I humanly could and put them in another aquarium with good clean water for my mixing station. Because that is when you're trying to save everything and everything's dying. That is a completely different scenario. In those situations, you have to act fast, you have to act judiciously, you've got to move anything you can find, which is very hard to find anything in milk. And you are reaching in blindly, hoping to find and rescue fish, hoping to find and salvage some corals. And you know, a kalkwassar overdose is super dangerous, and you cannot take your time fixing it. You got to be on it, and you're going to be up all night. Kalkwassar has a pH of 12. It's really dangerous stuff. All right, let's go to the next question. Emmanuel says, I'm switching to a glass sump soon. As you know my nightmare story already. Yes, I do. I'll tell you guys that in a second. And was wondering how long should I expect the silicone seams to last? 5 years, or depends on the quality of the silicone or the seam? If you're talking about gluing in baffles into your new sump, it'll last forever. You don't have to worry about that. It's not going to deteriorate. All the baffles do in a sump is redirect the water from zone to zone. They don't hold the tank together. They aren't there to be a reinforcement. They are basically to create a zone for the protein skimmer to be in the same height every minute of the day so that the skimmer can operate properly. And we have different baffles to trap microbubbles, so that way the water has to go down and up and the bubbles are popping in there and not showing up in the return zone. Other than that, it should be totally fine. Most people encounter when they build something like that, it's one and done. They don't have to go back and fix it. Usually the only reason something does go wrong with baffles pulling away or bending and cracking is because they were too thin. And if those baffles are too thin, they bow from the water pressure of the compartment before it. The water's pushing and it bends it and bends it. And as it curls, it's pulling away from the walls, and then it can just flip over. And even then, the rest of the sump is still holding the water. So you're not going to have a flood, but you're going to have to fix the baffle, which won't be simple to do because everything's wet. Basically have to drain it, dry it, put it back in place, new silicone. But no, you should be good to go for a while. So Emmanuel was saying, what was the disaster? They recently drilled a hole in the back of the sump to put a bulkhead, and somehow, even though it drilled perfectly fine, there was a huge crack in the sump. Both sides of the hole just split. And that bulkhead was put on hand tight, so it wasn't like a wrench had tightened it down and cracked it. I'm not really sure why that sump did crack, but it definitely is being replaced with a whole new one because of that happening. Aw. Insane Reefer just said their friend Calypso Reefing lost his brother earlier this week. And yeah, that is super sad. I can understand what that feels like. I'm still kind of numb from what happened in February. But it's really hard when it's fresh. It's even harder. It's going to take time. So thanks for letting us know. Dennis, are you suggesting a topic, or are you saying we should talk in a PM about your ATS? Let's have a conversation and see what's going on, Mr. Cheating and using a CNC machine. Wicked Scuba says, would a cap full of magnesium in a 90-gallon be too much at once? Probably not. Magnesium, first of all, it's watered down. It's not just pure magnesium chloride or magnesium sulfate. It's not the powder. And so it's been mixed with water to be a certain, let's call it density. I think that's the right term. And then you're going to put in, it actually takes a lot of magnesium to bring the number up. What I would recommend you do is use the Reef chemistry calculator. Just type Reef chemistry calculator into Google and hit enter. It'll take you to JDX site, and then you put in 90 gallons as your total system volume. You put in your current magnesium level, you put in what you want your magnesium level to be, and you pick what brand of magnesium you're using, and you click calculate, and it'll tell you how much to put. But I can tell you back when I was running my 280, I was putting in a 2-liter bottle of magnesium in my sump at a time because I needed that much magnesium. My tank, I had huge monopora that just slurped it up. And I'd mix these bottles and I'd make myself, I don't know, a few gallons of magnesium. And when it was low and I needed to bring it up 100 ppm, I'd put in a 2-liter bottle. It was crazy. I mean, yeah, I was a little wild and loose back then, but I never had any hiccups from that. It never was bad. It mixed into the system and went everywhere. And the corals kept growing. It was great. But it was crazy to put in that much. So a capful probably won't do anything. It usually takes a lot of magnesium to bring it up where it belongs. But then once it's up there, it tends to stay there. It doesn't just like come down again like alkalinity does so quickly. Insane Reefer says, did you do the recommended dose of Phosphate Rx? I did. My Naso Tang got a strange bubbling on one side of his face, but now it's healing. That's odd. I've always used the recommended dose or less. Don't believe I've ever used an overdose. It's 6 drops per 10 gallons if you're trying to drop at 0.5 ppm. So if your tank's at 1.0 and you wanted to bring it down to 0.5, you would use 6 drops per 10 gallons that night. And then, you know, in a week or so, you could do it again. And I don't know. I know people like to debate this stuff with me. There's people that just hate the word lanthanum chloride in general. And they like, GFO is the only thing that works. And I don't like GFO. I tried it for 9 months and had no results with it at all that worked. But Phosphate Rx works. I love it. And I have brought phosphate down. Okay, listen. I've had phosphate in my tank as high as 3.0. And it was not on purpose. And no, I wasn't feeding like crazy. What had happened was my auto feeder went crazy and drained the entire drum of food into the tank while I wasn't looking. Didn't even know. Fish ate what they could eat. It went everywhere. Never knew. And I'm looking at the drum one day and it's just spinning. The battery's still going. I'm like, how long has it been like that? And it's still spinning as I'm taking it down. Like, oh my God. And I checked phosphates, 3.0. So I would dose phosphate Rx and bring it down to, I don't know what I did, but I remember I dosed it, waited 2 days, dosed it again, waited 2 days, dosed it again, waited 2 days, dosed it again. Basically in about 2 weeks, I went from 3.0 back to like 0.1 or less than 0.1. And I never had things go wrong doing that. I didn't lose fish doing it because I didn't use a lot of it. I just used the right amount or less than the right amount and did repeated treatments over a period of days or weeks. But in general, I dose once and I'm done. And then, like I said, 6, 8, 10 weeks later, I do it again. I used to tell people I dose it 5 times a year because there's 52 weeks in a year and I did it every 10 weeks. I feel like I'm doing it a little bit more now. Maybe it's every 8 weeks possibly. But Tammy's 800-gallon Reef, she would put it in every week. She put in 100 drops a week, no matter what. And she had a tank full of tangs, full of fish, full of corals. And that was her way of keeping it down. It was simple and effective and worked overnight. So I don't know what happened with your Naso, and I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm glad that it's healing. But if you feel like the proper amount is too much for your fish health, I would dose less and maybe dose 2 times. Like, for example, let's say your tank is 0.25. Then instead of 0.5. Remember, 6 drops brings it down from 0.5, or brings it down 0.5, brings it down. So in theory, if your tank was 0.5 ppm phosphate and you dose 6 drops per 10 gallons, in theory, your tank should be 0 phosphate the next day. So if your tank's 0.25, you only need 3 drops per 10 gallons to bring it down to close to 0. And you can play with the numbers as however you want. I would definitely use less than. I never do the total dose. My system is 450 gallons of water, divided by 10 is 45, so 45 times 6, whatever that is, that's probably like, I don't know, 270 drops. I usually dose like 125 drops. So I'm doing like half of what it recommends, and I've had no hiccups. Hello, Paul. Paul is in Wales. I've never been there, but I think I should go one day. And Steve is here from Essex. I like these guys from the other side of the world that tune in. That's so great. I don't know how they understand my accent. Oh, by the way, guys, so last night I'm trying to upload the latest Reef Diary. It's an 8-minute video, 8 minutes and 3 seconds. And my phone is maxed out. It's a 512 gig phone, hard drive space. It is maxed out. I have been deleting things, trying to keep space, just to have 10 gigs of working space. And last night I tell it, export. and it tries and it just stopped abruptly. I was like, that's weird. And I looked and there was about 8 gigs of space. And I tried again and it said not enough space. I'm like, dang it. So I went all the way back at my camera roll to the early, to like 2006 and worked my way up. And when I got to 2013, that is the year or the time period when I reset up the 400 gallon. So this tank behind me is the replacement of the first tank that leaked. The first tank was installed in, I believe, God, I think it's like February 13th of 2011. And it sprung a leak 13 months later, which was in March of 2012. And then 18 months later, this tank arrived, which was set up November 2013, okay? Well, as I was going through looking for things to throw away, I found videos of my Reef tank right before I put the livestock in on November 9th, 2013. And I think we're gonna see those soon. I'm going to definitely share those because number one, you can kind of see where it all got started again, which I think is kind of cool. And it's really wild because I was narrating it. I don't know if I even used that footage in any videos or anything, but I can hear myself narrating and talking about what's going on, and I sound just like I do now. So it's really crazy to think that's 8 years ago, and I haven't changed a bit. I'm still explaining things in my videos. But that'll be a cool thing to share. Estonian Reefer says, what is your take on HLLE, which is head and lateral line erosion disease? What do you think causes it and how to prevent it? Do you add any vitamins to your fish food? Thank you. Well, generally speaking, HLLE, which is also called head and hole lateral erosion, you'll see like the spine of a tang will look weird and flaky. You could see problems around the head, around the eyes, and the fish could even be swimming erratically. And so a few things have proven what causes it. Poor diet is one, electricity in the water is another, carbon dust, which I think is crazy, but apparently carbon dust can cause it. And I'm not saying it's crazy like it can't happen. I'd be like, how is carbon dust getting in your tank? What are you doing in your system that allows carbon dust to get in your reef tank? Because when you put clean carbon in your system, brand new carbon, you rinse it really well and then you put it in. Either it's sitting in a mesh bag in your sump, just laying there doing nothing. I mean, it is the worst way of filtering carbon. It's the most passive way of carbon filtration I can think of, to just lie it down in the bottom of your sump in a bag and hope water will touch it. Hope water will go through it, because it won't. I totally recommend people don't do that, okay? But if you have a canister filter and you put carbon in it with floss and you push water in and force water out, if there's too much water moving through the canister filter, if it's going too fast, I guess you could flush out dust. But again, you're supposed to rinse it. It's supposed to be really well rinsed and clean, and you should see water coming out of the canister filter that's clear. It shouldn't have black in it. If it has black in it, you didn't rinse it enough, and you keep rinsing until it's clear, then you hook it up to the tank. And the third way, which is my preferred way, is in an actual reactor where water flows down the middle and then goes out the base and comes up through the carbon and exits out the top of the reactor and into your sump. And even then, your reactor is somewhere in the sump. The output of that reactor can be anywhere in the sump. It doesn't have to be next to the return pump. So even if some carbon fines, the dust, were to come out of the reactor for some reason, like maybe you're tumbling the carbon, which you shouldn't do, it should be landing in the skimmer zone or something, you know, and just kind of settling out. It should not be moving through the system and hitting the tangs on the side of their bodies and in their gills and everything. It shouldn't be like that. Just like GFO. GFO, we are very careful with it. If you're careful with GFO, you should be just as careful with carbon in the same approach. Something you can do if you wanted is the output tubing of the reactor of carbon or the canister filter could literally go through more floss or a fine micron filter sock to catch any of the dust that might be coming off. I don't know anyone personally who had tangs suffer from carbon dust, but I read a lot of articles and a lot of people freaking out about, oh, carbon hurts your tanks. And I'm like, man, I've been using carbon forever. I buy 50-pound bags of carbon and I use a couple of cups at a time in a reactor, and it runs for a few days, or if I let it keep running, it runs for weeks because I didn't turn it off. But I didn't have tangs suddenly having, as a matter of fact, I've never had HLLE in my tank that I'm aware of. I've never seen it present on my fish. So carbon is one that it gets blamed, and so you want to make sure that you're doing that correctly. And this stray electricity is the big one. I think that's the worst offender. And that's why you want to make sure that when you reach in your tank, you don't feel a little surge if you have a little cut on your finger. If there is stray electricity in your tank, you need to correct that, just like you have to correct anything else. And then proper fish diet. And like my coal tank has this weird thing around the head. And even the fish vet that saw that fish in person said, that's not HLLE. And I had another friend over here, his name's Drew, and the one that gave me that acro, Drew's acro. And he said, are you feeding a lot of nori? I'm like, I don't know, once or twice a week. He was like, you should just feed nori a lot. I think that fish is suffering from a lack of veggies, vegetarian diet. So I still have not stepped it up. But to be honest, I didn't think it was food either. I mean, it's possible, but the coal eats everything. It leaves kiss marks all over the glass if I don't clean the glass. It's eating all that film algae. It works off stuff off the sand. It works off the rock. I mean, it's constantly eating. Plus, it eats the food I put in at night. Plus, it eats the nori I put in there. I think I've even seen it chase down some banana when I do that, right? So I was thinking the high nitrate was really affecting that tang. And so I'm thinking, now that my nitrates are down at 10 instead of 80, I might see that fish start healing, which would be really cool. Many years ago when I got my 55-gallon system, I got it used, and it came with a Coral Beauty. And the Coral Beauty, one whole side of its head was just like eroded and looked terrible. And the nitrates in that tank when I picked it up were 200. And I brought them way down I have an article about how I brought them down with a big series of water changes. And about 9 months later, I was looking at that. I mean, I know just over time, but 9 months later, I think it was, maybe a year later, that Coral Beauty was perfect from end to end. It literally completely healed now that it was in good water. So having good water goes a long way when it comes to fish health. But it's not the absolute cure to everything, obviously. And there's certain things that you have to deal with and put that fish in a separate system and medicate it to heal it. But that's my take. I have fortunately not had to deal with HLLE. I'm looking for the next question. I don't even know what's going on here, but I'm going to put it on the screen because I need some help, guys. My tang has big duck lips. I've had him in quarantine. He's had it for 3 days without eating. I need some help. Duck lips? Like the mouth is just pushed out? I don't know. I'm going to recommend you go to humble.fish. That's literally what you type. Humble, period, fish, and hit enter in your browser. And that is a website about fish diseases. And maybe you can get some help there. The person that runs that website, he answers emails. He has a forum in his website where he shows all this stuff. He has articles galore. And if there's something going on that he recognizes, he'll help you. Odile says, I have trouble with getting sponges in my sump and it clogs up the protein skimmer. Is there anything I can do to get rid of them? They're kind of a tan color. So some kind of a natural sponge that grows, a living creature, is peeling off and getting sucked into the protein skimmer. I guess it would be a matter of cleaning out your sump really, really well. And maybe the overflow boxes, maybe they're growing up in there as well and then coming down through the drain lines. I do know that we want to make sure our systems are clean. And if you have something growing in abundance that's doing so well that it's everywhere, you have to remove the excess. That would be my suggestion. But yeah, you definitely don't want it clogging out the protein skimmer. Lincoln Town says, is it true that seaweed we feed our tanks is super high phosphate? Well, it's kind of a sheet of phosphate when you think about it. I mean, it's algae. It's sheet algae. And algae grows from phosphate and nitrate, and then we press it, we bake it, and we put it back in our tanks. So yeah, I'd say there's a lot. I mean, what you could do is take some of that, throw it in water, and I don't know, stir it around for a while, and then measure and see what you get. And odds are you'll get a really high reading. I've never even done it. It just seems to make sense to me. I didn't need to actually verify that one. Tech HR says, what are your views on the Aquabiomix test? I haven't done it yet, so I don't really have an opinion. I think it's kind of still in its early stages of us getting to know more about it, about the process, about the information. And the hardest part is what to do with the information once you have it. Because it's talking about the different biomes, the different types of bacteria in our system. But then how do we get the ones we're lacking? What are those called? How do we buy those? How do we put them in? And will it make a difference? And so that's still kind of new to us. It's still exciting, but I think it's something that will get more fleshed out in the next 5 years. Bill, I kind of answered this earlier. He says, what's the best way to get the scratches out of the inside of my acrylic reef without draining it? You're going to find some kind of a kit, and you're going to have to use your cleaning magnet to do it. And you're going to need a really good filter on the drains to catch the dust. And don't go crazy. Don't really go at it, aggressively because of the livestock in the system. So if you could reach out to Reef Keeper, his name is literally Reef Keeper 2. Probably through Reef Central, probably Reef to Reef. I know he's based out of Boston, has a beautiful reef tank, and maybe he can give you some suggestions or some sources of what to buy. But it's an ordeal. There are companies that will literally come in and they will completely polish your tank and do it in a day. And the thing is, you have to empty the tank for them. And then they climb in and they clean it all up, make it brand new inside and out. And it's not cheap, but then it's done. And you just put your nice clean reef back in there. You can remove the things you don't like anymore and kind of give it a fresh start. Lucas says, thank you for all you do for the hobby. I just wanted to say your heater mount is working great. I love it. I trimmed it to the length to suit the BRS heaters and glued it solid. Yeah, so the heater brackets, I have a few people waiting for those right now. The acrylic rod that goes across the top that holds it all together has been out of stock. And I've been trying to get more in. They sent me a different size, which doesn't help me one bit. So I am going to try and make a few this week for those customers just to get them their order. But I made this heater hanger that fits between the baffles, and you lay your heaters in there and then you lower it into place and they stay there, and the water has to flow over the heaters to go to the next zone. It's a really nice way to keep them in a safe spot. They do not melt the acrylic. I know people always worry about that. And they're in a spot where they're going to get maximum water over them because it's literally where the baffles are. So it's a nice process, and I make it where it's adjustable. So what I've been making, and I probably should change it to a smaller size. I have a big tank, so I always think big, but I make it where it can hang 3 heaters and it's 12 inches wide. Now, a lot of you have heaters that are 8 inches long or 10 inches long, and so the bracket wouldn't work for you, but I make it where one side is glued tight, and the other part you can slide it in to the correct width you need for your heaters, and then trim off the extra acrylic with like a Dremel or a hacksaw, and you can put a drop of glue on there, like even coral glue, to kind of secure it, and you have your DIY bracket all ready to go. So yeah, it's a nice thing, and that's what I mentioned briefly last night in the diary, that I cleaned the skimmer section, but I didn't do the rest of the sump. For me to clean the area between the baffles, I have to remove that algae turf scrubber and the stand platform I put in there and take the heaters out to then use that attachment that I showed you that looks like a crevice tool so I can vacuum out all the crap in there and scrub down the inside of the baffles. Really don't want to do that job, but it's going to happen. I'm not sure exactly when, but I'll probably clean the return zone next. I already did the refugium a couple of times since the reef reset. So the refugium zone's essentially detritus free. The skimmer zone's completely clean. Get the return zone. Then all I have left to do is the horrible baffles that are under the turf scrubber. And it's just going to be a back-breaking effort, and I don't like doing that. So, but I can't ignore it. Plus, I want to wipe down the heaters, make sure they're good. And so it's a perfect time to take everything out, study the heaters, make sure there's no cracks, no leaks, no water inside them. Make sure they light up, all three of them, because they're in a spot where I really can't see them very well. I'd have to do some, some crazy... I'm picturing an ostrich that sticks their head in the sand. That's me putting my head down in the sump to look underneath, upside down at these heaters when they're turned on to see if I see three little orange lights. And so it'd be easier just kind of, it will be more work, but easier to remove everything and get at them and look at them and wipe them down and clean everything and have a nice area of my sump. Steve Wiest had a beautiful reef tank that actually is one of the inspirations for mine. And he had a 7-foot long tank as well, but you only saw it from the end. You did not see it from the side. The sides and the end, this end, the overflow part, was all in his garage. So he just had this window that was 3 feet wide and I guess 30 inches tall or 24 inches tall or something like that. And you could look and see the reef go that way for 84 inches, for 7 feet. And he did his aquascape with a rockwork like that. And he had this valley, and he had this sand right in the middle, and the sand always looked perfect. And it turns out it was 1 bag of sand did that whole valley. It was super shallow, and he put jets of water under the rockwork to blow toward the center, so it always pushed the sand into the middle. Brilliant, right? Such a nice inspiration. I loved that tank. And then when he had to work on it, he went into the garage, and basically the platform that the tank was on was wide enough that he could just stand there and work in the tank, right? From either side, because you only saw it from the end view. And so he would stand there next to the tank and work in the tank he had to do, and he would, every month, he'd suck out that bag of sand and throw it away, and he put in 1 new bag of sand. So he used 12 bags of sand a year, and he always had a perfect sand bed. Every time you saw his tank, it was perfect. You're like, oh, how do you do this? How does it always look so good? He goes, because I put in a brand new bag of sand every month. Well, Steve also had down below this fantastic sump system with the protein skimmer and all the gear, and his sump was always pristine. And one of the things that he would, he had a sense of pride about everything he did. And he wanted that sump to be perfect every minute of every day. It never got dirty. And he actually challenged people in his local area. He says, you can come by anytime. You can just stop by and hit the doorbell and run into my garage and look at my sump. It will always look that clean. It's never dirty. And I was like, man, to be that invested in keeping your equipment that clean all the time, to be willing to siphon out all the sand every single month and put in a new bag to keep the glass clean. And, fantastic tank. But he ran a website, and it's still present. It's called OregonReef.com, and you can see some of the pictures. He also set up a cold water system that had these really cool things, saltwater fish and invertebrates and little tiny strawberry anemones and stuff that none of us kept back then. And he was like the only guy doing this back then. I mean, not the only, but he was the only guy I knew doing it. And he said it's really hard to get livestock because no one's doing this except me. And of course, public aquariums. And you can't tell a public aquarium, hey, can you order me in a sculpin? They're not going to do that for you. So it cost him a lot of money to get what he wanted. But he had this fantastic cold water system that is also on that website if you want to check it out. Microphone. Michael says, what's the best way to light a 180-gallon reef? I was thinking about 3 skies. Or, I'm sorry, thinking about 2 skies, or should I be using 3? Well, it's 6 feet long. You could try 2 and run them parallel with the tank and see how it looks. And then if you decide you want to add a 3rd one, you could kind of like shove them apart and put the 3rd one in the middle. But the sky covers 30 inches by 24. And 180 gallon is, 72 by 24. So 1-2 lights could probably light the majority of your reef with like the ends being a little less bright for corals that don't need much light. And you might be very happy with that. Or you might say, no, I want SPS wall to wall. then you may want 3 on there on your system. I'm using 3 for my tank, and my tank is 7 feet long. Ugh. See, I hate that I talk about products that don't exist. He says, I haven't been able to find the Tom's Aqua Lifter lately. That used to be something you could get off of Amazon or your local fish store, Marine Depot. So yeah, I don't know. I haven't tried to look for one in forever, but that was a really nice, low cost choice. But you know, you could do it with a dosing pump too. You could do the same principle. Some kind of slow dosing pump, you know, something inexpensive. The Comore pump could probably do it. I don't know. And you know, some people literally will do that. They will figure out how much their tank needs, and they will program a doser to dose that much top-off water each day. For me, I liked that the pump would be on when it needs to be on and then shut off when it's full. And so I wouldn't, you know, I'm talking about you would get some kind of a inexpensive, quiet, continuous duty doser that will just come on when the power is applied to it, and once the power stops, it just stops dosing. That would be kind of the solution. But the Aqua Lift, I mean the Aqua Lifter was the ideal thing. I think it's so cheap. And I remember taking it apart when it broke, and I was like, God, really? I was like, come on, I can fix this. And I was like, it was $11, just get a new one. But I was like, there's gotta be a way to fix this diaphragm. The rest of it's fine. Oh my God. Sometimes hobbyists, we can be so cheap, and it's like, I don't want to spend that money. I'd rather fix this one I have. And why won't they sell us just the diaphragm kit to put in the middle? Lincoln says, can you recommend something to hold bubble tip anemones temporarily in a display tank? They keep splitting. I need a place to hold them before I sell them. Well, it comes down to what you want to look at. If you've noticed, sometimes when you're visiting fish stores, they have like a all plastic basket with holes all around it. They're usually in colors. Probably come from the dollar store, right? And then sometimes they will secure like pool flotation noodles, or they'll use PVC pipe that they've capped and they zip tie it on so it floats, and they put those things in there where they can't get in the rest of the reef, and they can scoop them out to sell them. And you could do something like that. You could use a colander that's all plastic. You could make a cage out of egg crate and put that in there. It comes down to what you want to look at, basically. Dan says, my source water has 0.15 ppm of phosphate. Can I add Phosphate Rx to the mixing bucket and then dump the water into the tank through filter floss? Is this enough PO4 to cause crazy green hair algae in my display? Dan, I have a feeling that you are trying to test RODI water for phosphate, and you can't. So what I would do, if you haven't already, and maybe you have, and you know, feel free to comment again, and I'll come to your comment. Mix up that RODI water with enough salt to make 1 gallon of brand new RODI water, brand new salt water. Okay, just make it 35 ppt or 1.026 specific gravity. Just make a gallon and then measure that for phosphate. A long time ago, I was having problems with my tank, and I got out all my test kits, and I was measuring my my RODI water just like you did, and I was like, oh my God, all this phosphate, my RO system doesn't work, and I was all upset. And I called my supplier because I sell these things, right? And I said, this is unbelievable. And he said, that doesn't make any sense. And I was like, I've tested, and I even swapped out my DI with new DI and measured it, and it was still wrong. It was still high. And then I went to the local fish store, to Frank's, and bought one of his DIs, because it's a different brand, and put it in, and it was high. I was like, oh my God, nothing is taking it out. The city water is so bad. And it took me a while. And I mean, I was at the point now where my supplier was about to send off their DI resin for testing in a lab to find out what's wrong. Are they getting defective resin? And it was somewhere around that point is when I found out you can't measure phosphates in DI water. So my solution obviously is going to be mix it with salt water and then test and see what you get. And odds are you'll get 0, and that's not the case at all. Now, why do you have crazy green hair algae in your tank? Because there is phosphate in the algae itself. So I have a video on this channel, it's probably 15 minutes long, not like these 2-hour live streams, where I just say to use Phosphate Rx in the display tank to knock the phosphates down, and in about 3 days, that green hair algae will be weakened because it doesn't have what it's used to having, and you should be able to start ripping it out. And you pull it out, put it in a bowl of water, rinse your fingers, put your hand in the tank, grab some more, and you keep pinching it off. And you don't scrub the rock. You don't take the rock out and brush it. None of that. Just reach in, pinch, rinse fingers, reach in, pinch, rinse, repeat until you can't stand it. Stop, continue tomorrow, continue the day after that until you've gotten everything you can get out. And then put in a cleanup crew to eat what's left. That is the solution. Now, to answer your question, could you put Phosphate Rx in your RODI water and then somehow filter it? I don't know that you'll have the results you need in there, even if it was possible. I don't know how it responds in fresh water, first of all. Probably works fine. I just don't know. But I don't put anything in my RODI water. It is pure water for a reason. I don't want to put anything into it. I don't want anything in my container to contaminate it. I want that bin to be 0 TDS or 1 TDS for the life of that container. So that one I would say no. But I think you just need to double check by mixing it with salt and then test. But I'm 99.9% certain we cannot test for phosphate in RODI water. Cuban Reefer is here. Hello, Cuban Reefer. I follow him on Facebook. Kevin James says, I bought this tiger pistol shrimp 3 weeks ago, and I keep hearing what sounds like a snail shell being thrown at the glass. This dude trying to learn how to use his claw? Will it get dangerously louder? You know, it may not even be that shrimp. I mean, it could be, but it could just be a snail. I've got some snail in this tank, the Anemone cube over there. And every single night, usually, you know, around midnight, 11 o'clock, something in the evening, it just like takes its shell and like hits the glass 2 or 3 times, like tack, tack, tack. Every single night. It just does it. It's spinning or something. I don't know what it's doing. I actually have not seen it happen. I'm sure if I stood there waiting, it would never happen. But I can be watching TV and I hear a tack, 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 and I look, and of course there's nothing to see. But it could just be a snail just doing his little dance against the glass and not the pistol shrimp at all. But, you know, it's a good question, but I don't think that's what's happening. I think your snail is just hitting the glass themselves. Hey, Jose, that was nice of you to say that. He says, the less I do, the better my tank grows. This channel is #1. Mr. Reef Buster says, I'm thinking about ordering a custom nano tank, 2 feet by 2 feet by 1.5 feet tall, but the price for the Starfire glass would make the tank cost almost $1,000. Do you think an acrylic tank will be cheaper or the same? 2 by 2 by 1.5? It may be the same, and the acrylic will scratch more easily, which is a downside. I don't know what the price of Starfire is now. I do know when my 280 leaked, I was thinking about replacing the front panel and just have the whole tank rebuilt. You know, just cut it all apart, clean all the glass of every bit of dirt and silicone, and just get it down to slabs of glass. And I have a friend here in not too far away who was building aquariums, and he said he could build it if I prepared everything. If I completely took piano wire and cut the glass apart so I had a pile of glass and cleaned it. And I could have cleaned every square inch of that glass and given them a pile to work with and build a brand new one like Legos with new silicone. And I've probably been good for a long time. I said, well, if I'm gonna cut this tank apart, the front glass has some scratches. I'd like to get one piece of Starfire for the front so I have a brand new, perfectly pristine piece of glass if we're gonna build the tank again. And he says, yeah, no problem, I've got a supplier. And I'm pretty sure that one piece of glass for the front, which would have been 6 feet long, 30 inches tall, ½ inch thick, back then, which was gonna be 2010, pretty sure that one piece of glass was $500. So making a whole cube out of Starfire, being $800 to $1,000 doesn't seem unheard of. I think a 60-gallon aquarium right now, which is a little bit bigger than what you're looking at. You know, 24, 24, 24 is 60 gallons. So yours is maybe 50. I think those go for like $600 right now. Maybe higher. Things are just, materials have gone up, unfortunately. And so we, the consumers, have to pay more money now for the things we like. Bogdan is here from Romania. Hi. Can you give me some tips or suggestions on how to keep an anemone in one place and not keep moving all the time? Well, I like to joke. And there's a meme, or a gif, I guess, of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And she's spinning the stake in her hand like she's about to stab that anemone into one spot where it can't move ever again, like a giant, huge vampire-killing toothpick, right? But anemones will move until they find a spot they like. You may try, if it's in the ideal spot, to feed it. So it's like, hey, this is a great spot. There's food here. I'm never moving again. That may work in your favor. That's a possibility. But don't overfeed it. Just giving it some food, like a small, I mean, when I say small amount of food, I do mean that. So one of the things you can do is you can go to the supermarket and go to the deli area where they sell fresh meat and fresh poultry and fresh, oh, that's meat, fresh fish and shrimp and crab. And you can buy one shrimp, the whole shrimp, you know, a jumbo shrimp, and you can then, the tail section, you can cut that into like 5 pieces the size of a lima bean. So it's just a bean size. And then every 3 days, give the anemone one little bean of meat. And that might be enough to keep it where it is. But it comes down to where the light is, how the flow is, and its mood. I remember one guy compared anemones to a bagless, what did he call it? A brainless bag of water. And he says, we're fighting a brainless bag of water that wants to go wherever it wants to go. It has no brain, and it's just a balloon. And he's not wrong. That was actually a pretty good description. And we do fight them. We're like, no, I want you here. And I remember one time I had one, and this has happened to lots of people. It's not, this isn't a special story about me. But, you know, you'll have it in this one great spot, and then it decides to walk. You're like, no. And it starts going and going. It goes all around the tank, and it's touching everything you don't want it to touch. And eventually it goes right back to where it started, and it's like, oh, I like that spot after all, and it stays. It's just sometimes they wander. They just want to try a new spot. So I don't have any tricks that's going to keep it in one place. But feeding is one technique. Sometimes you could do something to kind of protect it. I've done things in the past where I had fish for some reason targeting, or even shrimp, like ornamental shrimp, would be picking at it to like steal food. And I'd put fish nets all over it to protect the anemone from being pestered by the shrimp or nipping by a fish. And that seemed to allow the creature to kind of, I don't know, feel more secure. And then, you know, eventually I could take the nets away and everything was fine again. Mr. Reef Buster said, is there more clarity between acrylic and Starfire? I'd say they're equal. Cast acrylic and Starfire glass are like perfect to look through. I mean, this tank is Starfire glass. And I mean, even on this video, you can tell it's really clear. It's beautiful. It doesn't discolor anything. And it's why all my tanks are made of Starfire. My frag tank is made of acrylic, and it looked great when it was new. Now it doesn't look so great. Paul says, in the UK, we have the DD X1 doser. It's made by Chemour. It basically is their branding on it, right? So yeah, you could use setup info for the DD version. Maybe find a good video of how to set that up to set up a Chemour pump. It's funny how you can find things that are exactly the same with a different name on the front and just a different color. And I remember when I was visiting Dubai a couple of years ago, they flew me out there to speak, and they had all the Deltec or the DD. What does that stand for then? I always say Deltec, but that's not true. But the DD brand would have their pumps in their color, which is black. And I was like, oh, those look just like Chemour. And it was just rebranded for them, made for them by the same company. Mervin, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. Karsten says, I have a question about crown. Dave says, what's your opinion on the Neptune skylights since you've had them for a while now? Any noticeable difference in coral growth and coloration compared to your previous lights? Well, Dave, first of all, I don't know exactly how long I've had them. I think I'm coming up on 5 months. Unfortunately, I have suffered some coral losses recently, so it kind of throws off exactly what you're asking. You know, have you noticed a change? Because I had colonies that are gone. You know, it's just open now. But I can tell you, since the first day I put the skies on the tank, when I looked at the Antheus and I looked at the skunks, their bodies were glowing with color, they looked better under the skies than they did under my metal halides. And the coral growth was definitely happening. I remember 1 month in of using the skies, after 4 weeks, my Shadowcaster was putting out all these new tips, just a bunch of them. And I forgot, also, we pulled out a lot of coral during the Reef reset in the end of June. So a lot of the colonies that I had running, we shrunk them way down, and then I had my lack of potassium thing kill off a lot of Montipora and affect the chalices and affect some of the acros, and so I have less now to compare with. But overall, health of the whole system looks good. Coralline growth is good. The rock work seems to be pretty decent. I keep mentioning how I want to use Live Rock Enhance, and I haven't done it yet. And the only reason I haven't done it yet is because I feel like as soon as I put it in the tank, people are going to be yelling at me on my diary, why are you putting things in your tank? And I just feel like I need to put it in there. I'm ready. I'm very ready. I was ready a month ago, and I held off. But I love how using Live Rock Enhance for a few weeks makes your rock just look so clean. And I'm ready to do that. So when I want to plant my corals, it's on clean surfaces and not some weird film algae or whatever that's on there I have to rub off to put the glue, to put the coral. I just want to have nice, pristine rock. So who knows? That might be tonight. I might just do it and freak out some people. I don't know. But overall, I have said, it's a weird thing to say this, but I should have done it sooner. I should have switched to the LEDs sooner, okay? I loved my metal halides. Number one, they were paid for, and I was used to them, and they did the job, and my corals grew. But I was buying ballast, and I was buying bulbs, and I was replacing them regularly. I mean, I had some issues with certain lights, like the middle light kept failing. I couldn't figure out why. I replaced the socket and the bulb and the ballast repeatedly. And I would call Reef Brite and say, hey, send me 3 more ballasts. You know, so I have 1 now and 2 more on the shelf. And send me, 6 bulbs, even though I need 1 right now. And so that way I have a few more. And so it wasn't like I was saving money. Plus, I was using 1,200 watts of light all day, my photo period. And when I switched to the sky, I was pulling like 200 to 300 watts of power. Far less amperage per day, so I'm actually saving money in that regard. The entire tank's temperature came down 1 degree from, it averaged, it would go from 77 to like 79 or 80, and now it's like 77 to almost 79 day after day after day. So that was a nice improvement. But the only reason I couldn't have done it sooner is the sky didn't exist before that. I would have had to go with Kessel or Radion or some other brand. And frankly, nothing was really drawing me in. I just was like, I'll just keep using my metal halides. And when Neptune Systems reached out to me, I guess like last November, he said, look, we've had the skies on a few tanks, and we'd like it to put on yours. Would you consider it? And I always say no. And I said, you know what? For once in my life, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to try it. And they said, okay, here's the thing. If you don't like them, if you hate it, we want them back. I was like, fair enough. And when I did the big switch, I did the video explaining everything. And that video, I know people said it felt like an infomercial, and it kind of was, because there was no video about the lights at that time. I was going to be the first one, and so literally it was basically scripted to cover everything so you'd have all the answers, because you couldn't go to any other video. There was no BRS video about them yet. There was no other product reviews. I was literally the first one to do it, and so I tried to really do it in depth. And I tried to ask all the questions somebody would ask. And so I am astounded at the comments I read by people about the lights, about this specific light. It doesn't matter what brand of light people buy out there, they just buy them and people talk about them and that's it. But for some reason, the venom that is out there attacking the sky, I don't get it. I don't understand it. It is weird. It is very, very strange. I don't understand how on earth people are just going to forums and constantly saying it's cheap or it's a copy or it's, I mean, they have like 5 or 6 things they just hit on. And the only reasonable reason or explanation for why they're doing this, apparently no one likes the price of them. Okay, you don't like the price. I get it. Who cares? That's the price. Either you buy them or you don't. I mean, that's the end of it. But to go on there and say, oh, well, it's just a rip-off of this or it's not built well enough or whatever, I don't know. Dwayne, who has a beautiful SPS Reef, has been running them since February of last year, I think. I don't know. He's had them a long time. And corals are growing out of his tank. I mean, there's no problem whatsoever. And he can actually change the coloration. So when he wants to do a live stream or do a video, he can and take nice pictures. It's really nice. And I am very pleased with the entire coverage, how my tank doesn't look dark in areas. It looks really clean and good, and I can adjust the colors. And I'm happy with them. And it's nice that I can use Apex Fusion to communicate with them. But if I didn't use the Apex controller, I could just use the app on the phone and use Bluetooth to control them. So I mean, it's actually a pretty great light. I don't have anything downsides to say about them because they do the job and they come on every day and they turn off. And programming them is not difficult. Boy, I can almost not say that. Programming them is not difficult. How are we doing on time? All right. Let's do, I don't know. Let me keep going through these questions. I'm getting tired. Hey, John, I was talking about you. He says, let me send you some corals. I need to go to your website. I haven't done it yet. You know me. I can procrastinate better than anyone you know. William says, would using caulk with no pox dosing cause a lack of oxygen levels in the tank with no skimmer? I don't like any of that. I think you need to start looking at getting a skimmer. I really do. The protein skimmer does not add oxygen to your tank. It drives the CO2 out of your tank. And it collects waste, which is a really good thing. It's like a safety net. And I know that you can run a reef tank without a skimmer, but having one on there, especially if you're going to be putting things in like no-pox, you need a skimmer. Now, will caulk affect the no-pox? I don't think so, because all Kalkwasser is basically calcium chloride. It's just a cheap DIY method of maintaining alkaline calcium at a certain level. But you can't use it to bring up levels or bring them down. It literally is, you get your levels where they belong, usually through water changes, and then use Kalkwasser to maintain that level. And it's semi-simple in that regard, because you just mix it up and let it put in the clear liquid. None of the sediment and none of the skin on the top of the container, but all the liquid in between is your Kalkwasser. You can use that. But I think you really should be considering a protein skimmer. And you know, you didn't really go into detail like what size your tank is, what kind of livestock you have, what is your nitrate level, what is your phosphate level. And all those factors actually come into play when it comes to answering your question. But having a protein skimmer is going to be essential while using no-pox. Alex says, do acans grow slowly? Yeah, they do, but you can feed them and that will encourage growth. You know, I see some hobbyists can really have some beauties where they're super puffy and fluffy, and you know they just they plant a few, and then in 6 months or a year quite the blanket of those polyps. So I think acropora grow faster, and probably because an Acanthostrea, it's an LPS coral that has to make some stony skeleton to make a cup for the next polyp. You know, I mean, there's a whole process here where an acropora just has to grow a tip and then make a branch and then another tip, and it's quicker. So yeah, I'd say slower. But feeding them definitely will speed it along. David says, thanks for the help with the candy cane coral. It seems to be holding up so far. Good news. Eric says, have you ever heard of using a laser to get rid of vermitid snails? If so, I was thinking of trying something. Manual removal isn't working. They're starting to smother my zoanthids. I would break off the tubes and cover the holes with glue to slow them down. I don't know that the laser is going to get the worm. I mean, I'm sure it could do something, but the laser is not going to just like penetrate the skeleton, you know, the hardened calcified tube as much as you're hoping, but it might boil the worm inside it, maybe. I had a laser for a while. As a matter of fact, because I never throw anything away, I have like 2 or 3 in the back room that are not being used, and I focused them only on Aptasia. I didn't really use them on anything else. But I know some people have discussed it, but I don't think it's going to be a big success story for you. Sharon says, I need to buy some of that, the Phosphate Rx. My nitrates and phosphates are in the sky. I started feeding lots of nori lately, and I feel like that is the one thing that's changed. Yeah, it's possible. Bigger water changes will help. If you're not doing large enough ones, you may need to step that up. But Phosphate Rx is such an easy way to bring down the phosphate in the tank. It will not touch nitrate. David says, have you looked at your calcium reactor media for your high phosphates in your tank? Nope, but I heard BRS did. And you know, they're apparently Reborn is measuring really high according to their results. I was like, okay. I mean, it's not like I'm going to stop using my calcium reactor, and I don't really want to stop using Reborn, but I could switch to a different one. It definitely wouldn't hurt, but I have so much of the Reborn on hand, it's going to be a while till I get to a new type. But that was interesting. I mean, listen, I've had people say, well, why don't you take the skeletons of the corals you removed and crush it down and use that in your calcium reactor? And because some people do that. And I've taken the skeletons and cleaned them really well outside, and then I smashed them up into smaller pieces, and I put them in a bucket with water, and I measured the phosphate, and it was crazy high. I mean, it was like 1.5, 2.3. It was a lot of phosphate. It's like, yeah, I'm not using this. Nope. I just threw it away. So I never took the time to put my new reactor media into a bucket of water to measure for phosphate, like BRS clearly just did. And so there you go. There's your answer. So there are some brands that have less in them, and then there are others that have more in them, and apparently I have one with more. But I have Phosphate Rx, so I'm kind of covered. It's okay. Terry, it's not boring to be from Texas. We're in a huge state. Hey, Paul, that sounds awesome. I would love that. Eric says, glue isn't working either. The population keeps exploding. He's talking about vermitid snails. I've reduced feeding and stopped dosing since I really don't need it. My water changes make up enough trace elements and others. So can you post pictures in Club Milos Reef for me so I can see what you're dealing with? Just go to facebook.com/groups/Milos Reef and let's see your vermitids. I want to see what's going on. I want to see this massive infestation, please. And I'll leave that up on the screen. I'll put my face behind it for a while. There we go. No, I'm kidding. So I'll leave that up on the screen for a little bit. Lucas says, save everything to the cloud. Online storage is cheap. I actually do. And I still have my iPhone 11. I'm using the 12 Pro right now. But I still have my 11, and it's empty. And so I used it recently for some filming as well, which was nice. But that's like my secondary camera. I grabbed my phone that's active, that has a cell. You know, I can use it for everything. I use that for all my filming. And I just pre-ordered my iPhone 13 yesterday. So, and that one comes with a terabyte of space, so I'll be good to go for a while. But I really need to remove old video and pictures from the phone. And the reason I haven't, I have like a copy, I have it in the iCloud, right? It's uploaded or backed up. I also have hard copy on my external hard drive. But when I'm editing a video with some of that footage, there are areas that are messed up. It's like the screen turns green, it like does this weird green flash. Sometimes you'll see that on this channel. There's a video I upload and there's like this moment where it goes green for a second, then it goes away, and then it happens again one more time. And like when I did the video with Caitlin, that was from 2017, there was a couple spots where I had that green flash, and I think I might have sliced that out, or I was trying to remove it. But what I ended up doing was I connected my phone to the computer and downloaded a fresh copy of those video clips, and they were clean. So somehow during the copy to the cloud or the copy to the machine, the file was a little bit defective. So I don't like to delete stuff until I've finished the video and it's up on YouTube. Once it's there, I don't really mind removing my old data. But yeah, I take a lot of pictures and a lot of video, and there's a lot of stuff I've never shared with you guys that I still keep saying one day I will. And you'll be like, God, Mark, this is from 5 years ago. You're finally sharing it? I know, trust me, I know. All right, I'm looking for the next question. Lincoln says, at what phosphate level do you use Phosphate Rx? Usually if my tank's like 0.5 to 0.75, then I use it. And if it's like 0.1, I don't care. If it's 0.25, I don't care. 0.5, I'm like, all right, you know, it's okay. It's time to put some in. And I know this is from earlier when I was talking because I'm always behind in the chat. Tech HR says carbon should not be tumbling around. Like, I agree. That's why I'm saying, how on earth are people getting carbon dust in their tank? What is happening? Are they tumbling it? I'm trying to understand what would cause it. It's so crazy to me. George is here from Morro Bay. Where is that? Speaking of coralline algae, I saw a comment just a second ago. Alex said, I see more coralline algae when my phosphates get lower. I noticed coralline is trying to pop up on the glass in the anemone cube. I clean this tank every single day, and I clean the anemone cube like once a week. So because of it, coralline spots are happening. So today I have to carve the glass clean so that it looks nice and pretty. And Sammy31D, by now you should know that my favorite phosphate removal method is Phosphate Rx, something we've been talking about quite a bit for the last half hour. It's easy. It's just you just drip it in the tank. And I have a video about it on this channel to show you how it works, and I sell it for my website. At milosreef.com. Let's throw that on the screen too, so we have all the banners going. So if you guys are buying things from Milo's Reef, you're helping feed me, which I appreciate. And Spock gets some food too. So I do appreciate it when you guys place orders. And we are heading into that season when people start buying more and more things, which is going to be good for me because it's been kind of a slow year. Sovsborg says, would a yellow angelfish be good around softies? Are you talking about the lemon peel angelfish? Softies might be okay. I think you should look it up instead of asking me. I mean, somebody might answer you here in the chat, but look up the exact fish you want and then read about its temperament, read about its diet, and I'm sure there's documentation that will show you what you need to know on Google. I have not kept one, so I can't answer that specifically. Kevin says, can excess bubbles in the tank cause problems? Return from my skimmer to my tank has too many. Okay, so the protein skimmer, you can usually turn it inside your sump one way or another way if you have some space to pivot it. The part where the water comes out of the protein skimmer, I like to put that as far away from the return zone as I can. So like if my skimmer's here and I have a baffle and there's a return zone here, I want, let's just take my mug. This is perfect. Here's the handle. Let's just say this is the output of the protein skimmer where the water's coming out, right? And it's full of bubbles because something's going on. If my baffle is right here and this is my return zone and water's coming out and going straight to the baffle and straight here, I'm gonna have microbubbles in my return zone. But if I turn the skimmer this way and the baffle's here and the water's going out, it has to go around the body of the skimmer and then get through the baffle and go over here. That should help reduce how many microbubbles get into your return zone. But take a flashlight and look in your return zone and see what is the source of the bubbles. Maybe the water level in your return zone needs to be raised up 2 inches higher because it's just the water falling down the baffle is falling too far. Maybe there's too much constriction. If you have a strainer on the front of your return pump to keep snails from getting in, but the holes are so small, it's actually causing the pump to cavitate and create bubbles. It could even be the plumbing going up to the tank, and then it goes through lock line, which is I like to call it the black caterpillar, the black bumps. If that lock line is above the water line, it can suck air in between the joints and push out air bubbles. So you need to find out where the bubbles are coming from. Is it really your skimmer doing it? Is it something happening in the return zone, or is it something happening in the plumbing going up to the tank? And once you find the source and stop it, you won't have bubbles in your tank anymore. You will occasionally see a bubble blow out into my tank, but almost never. Will they cause problems? No. It's usually just a visual impairment. It's not good looking. It kind of spoils the look because we love that crystal clear water as much as we can get. So you got to find out what's causing it. And you may need to slow down the return pump. You may need to change how the protein skimmer is oriented in your sump. You may need more baffles. Or it could be there's a leak in the plumbing going up that's sucking in air with the water and pushing it into the display tank. If you can take the lock line, just push it completely under the water. Again, if there's no bubbles in the return zone at all, if it's just clear water and you're still getting bubbles, then something's happening up high and you need to make an adjustment there. Oh man, Bill's tank is 600 gallons. Yep, Reef Keeper 2 is the guy to talk to, definitely, for sure. Hope you can find him. I'm trying to remember his name because I've met him. I've been to his house a couple of times. I think it's Paul, but I'm not certain. Anyway, super nice guy, beautiful reef tank. Reef with me says I brought my phosphate down from 0.23 to a stable 0.05 in the course of a week. That's great. The only coral that's upset is my Goni. Yeah, and you can feed that coral too. So hopefully it'll perk up again. And then should you raise the phosphates up for the Goniopora? I don't think so. I think feeding it, target feeding it would be best. There is a Goniopower food made for Goniopora that might work. It could just be that the coral is just irritated by the flocculant moving around in your tank, assuming that's what you used. Maybe you used GFO. I don't know what you used. But if only one coral in your tank is unhappy, but all the rest of your tank is doing well, then I consider that a win because you're kind of getting your water where you want it to be to add more corals in the future and to reduce the issue of algae happening in your tank. Jamwin, I think you need to buy a vowel, says, could I do an anemone tank on a 18 gallon or is it too small? You can. As a matter of fact, if you want to do rock anemones, that would be really pretty. But if you're talking about like a full-on bubble tip anemone with clownfish, it's a little small. Not unheard of, but as it splits and makes more of itself, you're going to have to keep getting rid of one because there's not a lot of room in that tank. Eric says, does Phosphate Rx have an expiration date? Nope. You have a bottle that lasted that long? No, it does not. Another brand of lanthanum chloride that I've used is Phosban L from Two Little Fishies, and I don't think it has a date on it either. And then Brightwell E, I think, is their phosphate remover. I think that's right. And they may have a date on theirs, but as far as I know, it doesn't expire. Havo77 says, I have a new 10-inch blonde Spock named Mick Jaguar. About a week ago. It's not eating very well. I'll only eat a couple of bits of mysis, nothing else. Any help would be great. It's a new fish to your system. It's probably being moody. I would just continue to feed your tank like you do each day at the same time, preferably with the same foods, and hopefully you'll see the Naso get more and more involved. If a Naso gets in a bad mood, if it just something irritates it, or like you introduce a bunch of new fish and it just goes to the corner and turns dark and won't eat for 3 or 4 days, that's them being upset. That's kind of normal. But I would definitely put nori in the tank on a clip or on a rock down low. You can also take some nori between your fingers in the water and just break it up. Or you could put flake food in the tank, or you could do pellet food in the tank. I mean, there's a lot of choices for food, and of course you can do frozen foods as well. But having a variety added to the tank each day will at least provide opportunity for your Naso to get a meal. Eventually it should start perking up and be happy to be at the front of the pack to get food, because that is a very personable fish. Jake says, I just ordered a bunch of copepods from Algae Barn, and it seems like I'm only going to need about half of them to seed my 20-gallon Nano. Should I add all of them at once, or will that be problematic? Well, I don't know that you can save them. I don't know how long they live in that bottle, so I think you just put them in the tank, and you'll probably need to put some kind of food in the tank, like phytoplankton, to give them all something to snack on as well. So pods in the tank, and then some phytoplankton. And when it comes to phytoplankton, a lot of people don't really talk about this, but we used to talk about phyto a lot back in the day. And they said, you don't just get it and just pour it in the tank or just put in a squirt or whatever. You would put in a fixed amount, and then the next time you did it, like, I don't know, I feel like we did it every couple of days, you'd put a little bit more and you'd do a little bit more, and soon you'd be putting in quite a bit. But then again, we were growing our own phytoplankton. And so it wasn't as dense as like getting Phyto Feast from Reef Nutrition, which is like super dark green, and it's like a mixture of 3 different types of phyto, to where it's still, we don't want to put in a whole bunch and pollute the tank. You want to put in some and then ramp up your more and more to a fixed level, and then you just, this will help increase your pod population and keep your pods well fed. And some corals do inhale or ingest the phytoplankton as well. Alrighty. I see a lot of conversation that's nothing to do with me here. Scrolling. Sharon says, I have the 2 Orphic Atlantic 4s, and I love them, but when you got the skies, I was jealous. They look sweet in the video. Yeah, they're really nice. And they're dead silent. There's fans on them, but I never hear the fans run. I only hear some clicking that happens at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. It must be as it's switching to higher or lower intensity, but it doesn't like click throughout the day. It's just like this weird thing at 12:19 each day that happens. Because my lights start at like 11:30, so that's basically 45 minutes later, it's going to like, I don't know, the next intensity. Dan says that the water was mixed to 1.026. So you tested salt water that showed high phosphate? Well, that shouldn't be true. I guess the next choice would be to actually mix up your salt water or send a sample off for ICP and have them do an analysis of that. The ICP analysis also does an RODI test where they check things. It's a different test entirely. And I did that myself. I sent in 1 ICP of my RODI water, and I sent in 1 of my brand new salt water. And that way gave me some numbers. But yeah, I wanted you to be aware that you can't test RODI for phosphate. It's because it's deionized. It's just too pure. The kit doesn't work. But I don't think I would put anything in my brand new salt mix to lower the phosphate. I think I would just treat the tank like I normally do. And, you know, because the only time that salt water is going in the tank is during a water change. And then, you know, you have equipment in place to do filtration. You might have GFO in place to remove phosphate. And if your phosphate seems to be creeping up, you can bring it back down with whatever product you want to use. Reef P says, what is the difference between wet and dry skimming? One of them is removing more. Yes. So wet skimming is your cup is just overflowing with liquid. And dry skimming, you have like a dry foam and you'll get a little bit of skimmate in the collection cup. And there are reasons why people go one way or the other. I'm kind of a middle of the road kind of guy. I want some liquid to come out, but I don't need a lot to come out. I am not looking to remove a gallon of water a day through my protein skimmer. And my waste collector that you guys have seen is about this tall. And I don't actually know what it holds. I've never tried to measure the contents, but I assume it's probably 1.5 gallons. And there were times where my skimmer wouldn't pull out anything. It'd be like a week and I only pulled out this much. And then there's times where I'm doing more with the tank or the skimmer is dialed in a little bit wetter and I would pull out about this much skimmate. So it comes down to how you're using your protein skimmer to how much skimmate you're going to collect. Oh my God, I got to the bottom of the questions. Nice. Brian says Premium Aquatics has the Aqualifter pump if you guys are looking for that. That's good. BRS hasn't bought Premium Aquatics yet? Magroth says, I bought a small frag of a zoanthid, a few months ago, 2 polyps, and the glue didn't hold and the zoa got lost. Now a few months later, I randomly found it in the sand. Awesome! Now you can try to glue it again, so you don't lose it. Ah! Brian says he lied. The Aqualifter is not there, it's discontinued. So, I guess they're hard to come by. Maybe check eBay or something. I don't know. I haven't gone looking myself. Hey, I just noticed that I'm blurry. Does that mean we're done with the stream? It likes to focus on the tank. I think we'll just stop. I'm tired. It's been a long, hard week. Listen, guys, as I said at the beginning of the stream, it is Water Test Saturday. Please do test your water and be sure that you are staying on top of everything with your tank, just like I am with mine. Because if we aren't doing what we're needing to do, our livestock suffers. And water tests save lives. That's what Caitlin said, and it's true. So we want to make sure we're doing what we need to do, our due diligence, make sure our husbandry is good. Don't be lazy. Don't let your reef get away from you. Take good care of it so that way it can be pretty and you can share it. If you haven't done it so lately, please do post some pictures in Club Milo's Reef. I'd love to see your tanks. You guys get to see mine. I don't get to see yours very much. So thank you for tuning in today. And there will be something coming out later today for the guys that are members of this channel. And then there will be a diary tonight, probably about the water test results from today. That's it. Have a good day, guys. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye.